In this video, I want to show you how we can write something like a snippet, where I type something and I hit tab, and how we can do something like that from scratch with Neovim. And I think it'll give us a good understanding of how to build custom plugins with Neovim. So the first thing we want to do is create a file to hold our code. So we'll create a snippets.lua. And in here, what we want to do is we'll set up a key map so that whenever we type tab, or shift tab actually, in insert mode, so we want to have a key map on shift tab, we're going to insert some content. So basically whenever we hit shift tab, this is what gets typed out. And if I load this now, source this file, now if I type some stuff and I hit shift tab, you see that it expands to what up. But of course that's static. We want this to be dynamic. So we want it to really be a function. Now we could put a function in here in line, like that, and put some code in here. But it's probably better if we keep it clean, we'll create a module. So we'll have a module up on top. We'll call it snippets. Like that. And we'll have a function called expand. So now the key map, we'll call this snippets.expand. Now the thing that the expand is going to do is it's going to put text into the file. So we can do that by calling Vim API, and then there's a function called mvim put, and this takes some lines, and then if we look at the help for this mvim put, you see here the parameters it takes a list of lines, it takes the type, which it says could be an empty string. So we'll do that. And then the next parameter is, if true, insert cursor. So let's do that. We'll say true. So we'll insert the cursor. And then the last parameter is follow. If true, place cursor at the end of inserted text. So let's do that. True. So this will put the cursor at the end. So now we just have to figure out the lines. For now, let's hard code it. So we'll say that the name of the snippet is test. So essentially imagine typing test and then shift tab. We'll have to figure this out dynamically, but for now we can hard code it. And let's hard code the snippet too, which again we'll have to figure out dynamically. But for now we'll say snippet is test. And then we'll need a line. So to get the lines, we can split the snippet. So we can take the snippet, and remember the snippet could be multi-line, right? It could have new lines in there. So we'll use vim split to split the snippet on new lines, like that. Okay, let's now source this file. I'll close the help. Let's source this file. And now we'll go down here, we'll type test. And we have an error. That's because we named this incorrectly. So let's rename the variable here. It's supposed to be called name. Source this. Remove that and source the file. Now if we type test tab, you see it says snippet is test, but you notice that it did not delete the text, the last word that was typed. So we'll have to build that logic in next. So to do that, to clear the logic, we would need to know, like, we would need to know, like, when we hit the tab right here, we need to know what the row and column is of this, right? Right now it's line 13, column 4. So we need to know that so that we can walk backwards and delete that word. So let's figure out how to do that. So I think the first thing we need to do is we'll need to know the row and column, and we could get that from by calling Vim API and Vim win get cursor, and we could pass in the window, which is 0, the current window. 0 just means current window. And this actually returns a table. So we could unpack the table like that. By inserting table, I mean, if you look at the bottom of my screen, left-hand corner, if I was to call Vim API and Vim win get cursor with 0, you see it returns a table with 2 cells. So we're just unpacking that here. And then we'll clear the text by calling another Vim API for setting the text. So we'll say that we want to update the buffer And we want to update the buffer text in the current buffer, so 0 is the current. And we need to say the row and the column. But we need to go back, right? Remember that this is column 4, so we need to go back. So we need to go back string length of the name. So test is 4 characters, so we're going back 4 characters. And another important thing is the row here is 1 based. We need it to be 0 based. So we need to go -1. And then we'll go, again, the same row. So we're going basically from a position to a position. So row column to row column. And the column is the current column. So we're going from here, from test to here. And we're replacing, and then we're just passing true. If we look at the help for this function, mvim buff set text, we should do it. So mvim buff set text, you see the last column is replacement. And so we're basically saying true. Replacement, array of lines that should be used as a replacement. So it should be an array with just an empty string, meaning we're replacing it empty. So now let's close the help and let's try it again. Let's source this file. And so now if we type test tab, we get an error. Attempt to call field len. All right, it's not length, it's len. Like that, len. Let's source the file, and now we'll type test tab. There you go. So now it deleted the word test and it added the snippet. Cool, so let's delete that line. So the next thing we want to do is let's make this dynamic, this name. Imagine that we had a function that said find name, and we would need to know the current position. So let's give it the row and the column. We'll just move this line up. So I'll delete this and move it up here. So that will have it available. Now we'll need a function called find name. So it'll be something like find name, row column, and we'll need to find the lines. Even though really we're just finding one line, the API from Vim has a function that gets you multiple lines, so it's an array. So nvim buff get lines. Current buffer 0, right? We just want the current one. And again, we want to go from row -1 to row. So we're just getting one single line. If we look at the help for this, nvim buff get lines, you see the last parameter is called, so basically the buffer, which is 0, is the first parameter. Second parameter is the start row, the start position, and then the end position. And strict indexing is the last parameter, which we'll just say true, it's fine. So we get the lines, and then we'll need a way to find the last word. So imagine we're typing stuff like hello test. We need to have a function. We need to know a way to walk back on this word to the next space, or if it was at the beginning of the line, to the end of the line. So we need to basically write some code that will do that. Now, I'll imagine, let's make up a name for this function. We'll say return find previous word, and we'll give it a line. So the lines are an array, so we'll just take one line, first line, and the column, so that it can find backwards. So I'll just copy and paste this function in, because I don't want to make you watch me write it. But the idea is that you basically do a while loop where you get one character at a time. So you're basically walking backwards. So imagine the word is test. You're going one character at a time until you hit either the end of the line or space. So if it was a hello test, it would walk backwards until it hits a space. That's this here, this condition. If character is a space, then break. Otherwise, it keeps going through, and then it'll, if it's an end of a line, it'll just end up going through the while block and then returning the text. So there you go. So that basically does that. And now we can use that here. Let's test if it actually works. And I see I missed the function name here, function. Great, so now let's source this. So now if I type test, shift tab, snippet is test. If I type something else like blah, shift tab, snippet is blah. So you see it's dynamically pulling in the last word. Great. So now the next thing is to make this snippet part dynamic. So the first thing is we need a place to store snippets. So I'll put it up here in the module at the top. I'll say that we have a list, and the list will be based on file type. So imagine we'll have a Lua file type. We'll have, a JavaScript file type, etc., etc. And then each of these will have the snippet. So imagine we have a p snippet. So if you type p tab, it'll say something like this, print. If you type, I don't know, func, it'll be function example, etc., etc. So we can have, let. We'll have another one, const. So we'll need a way to load the snippet. So we'll update our code lower down here. Instead of hard coding it, I'll wipe that out, and we'll have a function called find snippet. And it will use the name, so it'll find it dynamically. And so let's define this function, find snippet. It'll be something like local function find snippet, takes the name as a parameter, and it'll use, first we have to figure out the file type. Is it Lua, is it JavaScript, is it TypeScript? So we'll have so we can basically, if you look at the bottom of my screen, you can call vim.o.filetype, which tells you that the file type here is Lua. So file type is vim.o file type. And then we can find the snippets for that file type, which is just snippets.list, right? Snippets list is the thing we define at top here. Snippets list. And we go back. Snippets list. And we use the file type. If it's not defined, then it should just be empty. And now that we have the list of snippets, we can return the one with this name, which might be no, right? So we should probably check here if the snippet is nil. So if snippet equals nil, then we should probably just return. But it would also be nice to put out a message like down here that says like snippet not found. So we could do that by calling vim notify. And we'll say something like snippet, and we'll need to make it, we'll need to make this parameterized. So snippet %s was not found. So to make that a parameter, we use string format like that. And then we pass in the name of the snippet, the name of the snippet. Now we want this to show up in red, so we'll say vim log levels error. Okay, let's source this file and test it again. I'll move to the end of the file and I'll source it. So if we type test tab, we see on the bottom, you saw that? The message, see again? Snippet test was not found. Now if we say func, we know that's a valid snippet. We hit shift tab, you see, there you go. It put it in. If we undo that and we type, what was the other one that we had? P tab print, there you go. So it's working dynamically. Now obviously you'd want to load these snippets from the file system, but that's just busy work. I'm trying to give you the general idea more. Now the other thing that would be really cool is if I go back to the bottom of the file and I do, like, for example, func, I would rather have the cursor not at the end, but here in the name of the function. So it would be nice to make the cursor dynamic. So the way I'll do that is I'll go back to the snippets at the top of the file. And I'd like to use this thing like a character like $, to indicate where the cursor should be. So here it'll be like $, here it will be $. And then we'll need to figure out where the $, is and then put the cursor at that position. So to do that, let's go down back to the snippet logic. And what we need to find out is there a cursor position? So we get the snippet, we check if it's valid. If not, we raise an error message. Otherwise, let's see if there's a cursor position in it. So we'll do cursor position, and we'll figure it out by calling string find. So we'll look inside the snippet for the character $. That'll tell us if there's a cursor position. So if there is a cursor position, we need to remove the $, from the snippet. So let's do that here. We'll say the snippet equals string, I will G sub, meaning replace snippet, or replace the dollar character with an empty string. Now, remember at the end here, we said that when we put the lines, we told it the second parameter means where it should place the cursor at the end. But if there's a cursor position, meaning if there was a dollar sign in the snippet, then we should do it manually here. Do it ourselves. We want to do it ourselves. We want to place the cursor ourselves. So to do that, there's an API, Vim API, nvim when set cursor. Cursor position is the buffer is the current buffer. The row we already have, and we want to set it to cursor pos -1 to be 0 based. And so now let's go to the end of the file and test it. So I'll come down here, I will source the file. And now let's see if we say func like that, you see it put the cursor right there. If we say p tab, it puts the print in there. Perfect. So before I let you go, a couple of things. One is I would clean up we're calling Vim API a lot, so we can probably create a variable for that at the top. So imagine that we have local API equals vim.api. And then we could do a replacement on everything to say replace Vim API with just API. There we go, so that's better. Yeah, so there you have it. I think the only thing I would say is, it's not perfect. Obviously, it's not loading stuff from the file system. It's not handling, multiple markers. It would be nice if you could do, if you had an if tab, you would want the cursor first cursor to be here, and then the second, then you should be able to hit a character and go to the next tab stop. It doesn't do that. It also doesn't have a default value, like it would be nice if you said let tab in JavaScript if it had the name was X, but maybe it was easy to change it, so you'd be able to have a default values would be nice too. But this is the general idea of it. All right, guys, see you in the next one. Cheers.